Hello, this is Mike from the MFL team, and welcome to the new Pearson Edexcel MFL GCSE Paper 1 speaking module. In this one, I'll talk you through some of the details of the three tasks and try to show you how we made it as compassionate and inclusive as we possibly can. So I'll start this bit by asking you now just to think about how your students feel when they take the speaking assessment. We've been doing this launch now. We're in May of 2023. We've been doing launch events for the last 3 or 4 months. We've had a variety of words describing how students feel, all linked around the word anxiety is probably the best way I can describe it. So things that the students have said directly is they lack confidence, they feel insecure about what's coming up. They feel like they can't prepare properly. So they've got maybe the knowledge and teachers have given them all the tools for exam, but they feel like they're going to get caught out and suddenly put in situations that they can't cope with in the exam. They can't relate to certain situations. We've talked about this in cultural capital modules in this series, where suddenly students have to imagine they're on a ski slope or traveling to some exotic country they've never been to before. It can put them in a very difficult situation compared to other students who have had that experience. It's not fair, and we need to address that. They feel stuck if there's no choice of tasks. So suddenly they're faced with only this they've got to talk about without another out that they can turn to. It can just put them on the spot and not give them the opportunity to show what they can do. And they just worry about making mistakes. We all had that when we go overseas, where we feel we're in a country where you're a bit embarrassed about making a mistake, and they feel like they're getting assessed on that in the middle of an exam. So we've worked very hard to ensure they're going to be assessed on communication as much as possible, especially when doing things like conversation. So let me take you through the paper now, and first of all, let's talk about the preparation time. So it's 15 minutes in total, which we'd have seen previously, and that is split between 14 minutes in the preparation space with the invigilator, with all the stimulus cards that they're given. But there's one major difference in this assessment compared to the current one that's running, and is actually very unique to us in Pearson Edexcel. And that's that we've given 1 minute of that 15 minutes of privacy in the assessment space itself. The student will move into the assessment room and they have 1 minute to practice out loud the read aloud if they wish to. It's that chance to be able to hear the sounds, put their mouth muscles into play before they actually speak and get assessed on the read aloud. They're also going to be allowed to annotate the read aloud card. We'll see something on that in a little bit later about how that can be put into practice. The annotation can take place during the invigilation time. It's not only for that extra minute time. Overall assessment time is the same as it is now. So for foundation tier, 7 to 9 minutes in total, and for higher tier, 10 to 12 minutes in total. Okay, so the read aloud is worth 12 marks in total, and we've made it the first task. We feel it's the one that they're most in control of, and they can move swiftly into that after the preparation time. What they'll do is read a short passage, and this tests the sound symbol correspondences. So the AO3, foundation tier is 35 to 40 words, and it's 5 sentences, and the higher tier is 50 to 55 words in 4 slightly longer sentences, as you can imagine. After this, they answer 2 straightforward questions related to the passage, which tests AO1. They aren't comprehension questions on the passage. Okay, so they don't need to, in theory, understand everything in the passage to be able to answer those 2 straightforward questions, which will be about opinions, likes, dislikes, etc. The recommended timings for this will be 1.5 to 2 minutes for foundation tier and 2 to 2.5 minutes for the higher tier. So here you can see an example of the read aloud from the foundation tier. On the student stimulus card, there are a few notes which are important. You can see it says once you've finished the read aloud, you have to hand back the stimulus card to the teacher. That's because after this, they'll be asked 2 questions related to the passage, but these are not comprehension questions. They'll be about opinions, dislikes, likes, etc. So open questions, and they're only going to be assessing communication. It does state you need to say more than 1 word answers to get the full marks, and there's 2 marks for those 2 questions. But please encourage your students to say something. Please don't let them just freeze and not say anything, because they could still get the 1 card, even 1 mark rather, if they can say 1 word back to them. Here are the type of questions that you get. Now, the question you may have is, well, hang on a minute, what if the student says something lifted from the read aloud themselves? Will they get penalised for it? And the answer is no, they would have handed that back. And if by chance they said something that they've just read, or they've learnt it and they've managed to retain that, and it's relevant to answer one of these questions, then they will be able to receive full marks if it's deserving for that mark. When working on the mark scheme, we trialled many different methods and found that the holistic mark scheme that you can see on the screen was the most positive and compassionate. So students will be assessed on the extent to which pronunciation is clear and comprehensible, allowing for communication to take place. We didn't want to focus on a tick-based system for specific SSCs. We found that pronunciation might be correct in one place and not in another, and we didn't want to have perfection to be able to require the top marks. We will and have provided extensive exemplification and support to understand how to apply this supportive and forgiving mark scheme. Okay, you've heard me talking about this now, but let's have a look at a very short video of a student, a real one, attempting the read aloud task with the same stimulus card that you saw just a moment ago. The student was given 1 minute of silent prep, then read the passage. She was then given a further 1 minute of non-silent prep in terms of she could practice reading it out loud and make some annotations, and she read it again. What I want you to do is look at the differences between the two, not just in the accuracy and ability to communicate and read aloud, but also how she felt when she was taking the assessment. What do you think she would have left the exam room feeling from the first recording to the second recording?
J'ai 6 ans, mon anniversaire c'est le choice, mais j'aime faire la fête avec ma famille. Mon père prépare un bon gâteau au chocolat. Normalement, je mange à la maison et je regarde la télévision. J'ai 16 ans, mon anniversaire c'est le 3 mai. J'aime faire la fête avec ma famille. Mon père prépare un bon gâteau au chocolat. Normalement, je mange à la maison et je regarde la télévision.
Okay, you can better understand the words that she says, but there's still some issues, so it's not absolutely perfect. But I'd imagine you'd agree that she spoke with far more confidence, body language changed, and having that extra practice allowed her to really be able to show genuinely what she could do compared to the first one. Now, she didn't change in that 1 minute in terms of her ability. She just had a chance to practice it, and we feel this is such an important thing. So I hope that's a bit of a decent example to show the impact that that 1 minute read aloud can have. Now here on the screen you can see her annotated stimulus card. You see a few examples I've circled here of ces and toi and famille that she's written in her own phonetic way, and you saw the difference that made in her overall performance. Okay, now let's move on to task 2, the role play worth 10 marks and AO1 being assessed. There are lots of small differences in the role play for the new spec compared to the current, even though they look fairly similar on the outset, and we'll take you through those over the next couple of minutes. So first one, fairly major one, all the student card prompts are going to be in English so they can understand what they have to do. There will be a range of possible realistic future-focused transactional settings known in advance. You can see them on the right-hand side of the screen here. So cafe, restaurant, shop, market, all the way through down to doctor's surgery and in town. So you can prepare the students, even if they haven't had experience of these before, you can prepare them over the course of the 2 years. There's no requirement to use the formal register. If the students use the informal register, they will be accredited for their responses equally as they would if they use the formal register. There is a finite list of interactions which you'll be able to see in the specification. Prompts are in the order that they will be used. So the student responds to the questions that the teacher is asking them. And questions to be asked by the student will always be in the same place. So for the foundation tier, it's always bullet point 5. For the higher tier, it's bullet point 5 and 1 of bullet point 2, 3, and 4. And the recommended timing for this will be 1 to 1.5 minutes for both foundation and the higher tier. So here it is. Here's one of the cards that your students will be doing from 2026. And on the surface, looks pretty similar, doesn't it? But let's go into the details. So you see here, this first of all, the teacher introduces the situation in English, explains clearly where they are and where the role play will take place. You can also see there's some guidance for the students. So again, similar to the read aloud conversation part, or the two questions that they have, the students have got to use more than just one-word answers to gain the full marks. However, it's a 0, 1, or 2 marks scheme for this, so students should say something. So please encourage them to just say, even if it is just one word, they may get a mark. A really important part there. You can see the prompts are in English below. There's no question marks, there's no exclamation marks, there are no unknown questions suddenly being thrown at them, and the students are in control of what they say, so they'll be able to use their own vocabulary without having to do translations or trying to figure out what does that question mark and one word mean, what do I do with this. And you can see this is from the higher tier, so there are 2 questions, and that's bullet point 5, and in this card it's bullet point 4 of the questions they have to form and ask the teacher. And here you can see the nice prompts, which is in the current qualification also, where the teacher can ask, vous avez une question? Do you have a question? To the student, to make sure you're not just both staring at each other and feeling very frustrated, not knowing what to do next. So let's talk about the picture task. It's now the picture task plus conversation, hence why there's 28 marks apportioned to this. We also know that anxiety levels can go quite high for conversation, so we've done our best to make sure this is as compassionate and accessible as it possibly can be for students, so they can show what they can do. The picture description is going to be worth 8 marks, and there'll be 2 straightforward compulsory questions following the picture description, each worth 2 marks each, so there'll be 4 in total, so that's a total of 12 marks. Now, one of the things to make sure they feel confident, better prepared for this assessment, students will be given a choice of 2 thematic contexts 2 weeks in advance of the speaking window, and the choice that they make will then be the thematic context, which then dictates what they're going to be, which picture they'll have, and the conversation that they have afterwards. When they go into the assessment room, based on that thematic context they chose previously, they'll be given a card with a choice of 2 pictures on it. These are both in colour, because students said and fed back to us during trialling they could engage much better when the pictures were in colour, and they have to describe one of those pictures in the assessment room, the people, location, activity, just one, as I mentioned now. And the 2 straightforward compulsory follow-up questions, they'll, as I said, only worth 2 marks. They have to give more than one-word answers to access the 2 marks, but do make them ask students to have a go, even if they feel like they're clamming up. Just have a go, they might be able to get 1 mark. For the foundation tier, it will be in present tense, one of the questions, and for the higher tier, it's present tense, and one of the questions will be in the past tense. You can see the recommended timings below. Foundation tier 1.5 to 2 minutes, and the higher tier 2 to 2.5 minutes. So let's have a look at the broader conversation part of the picture task. It's worth 16 marks out of the 28. And based on the feedback that students said they really want to be able to communicate at the end of the 2 years in the target language, we've made communication the privileged aspect in the marks scheme. There is only, out of those 16 marks, only 4 of them are going to go for A03 for grammatical accuracy. For the broader conversation, which, don't forget, is based on the thematic context that they pre-selected 2 weeks prior to the speaking window, there is going to be a compulsory starter subject as shown below. You can see it on the screen. So with a suggested question or a prompt. So you can see here it says you must begin the follow-on conversation by asking the candidate to talk about friends. For example, décris-moi under des amis. So describe one of your friends. This is not a mandatory question, and you will be able to ask questions that you feel will make sure the students can access the higher marks. So students can draw upon any relevant vocabulary from the full vocabulary list or even beyond the list. So students won't be penalised if they don't use extra words or vocabulary from beyond the list, and it means that students, if they use the full vocabulary list, they can access the higher marks. Now, during the conversation, and this is something that's on the teacher card and also the student card, it states your teacher will ask you questions in the present, past and future tenses. Your responses should be as full and detailed as possible. So you as a teacher are in control of what is being asked and can prepare accordingly for this part of the assessment. The recommended timings for the conversation part are for foundation 3 to 3.5 minutes and higher tier 5 to 5.5 minutes. So let's look at the summary of the key points we've learned in the speaking paper. So the read aloud, you're going to have that 1 minute of practice time in the assessment room where the student can practice out loud before they get assessed. There's going to be the opportunity to annotate on the stimulus card itself for the read aloud only. There are going to be the 10 realistic transactional settings known in advance for the role play. So you can practice this even for students who haven't had those experiences before. And there's going to be the prompts that are going to be in order that they're going to be asked for the student. And there are no unknown questions. There are no surprises for the student when they go into the role play. For the picture task, there is the pre-chosen and a student selected thematic context. That's 2 weeks before the speaking window, and it'll be randomized where the students have a choice of 2 thematic contexts for the picture task and for the follow-on conversation. The conversation, don't forget, will have a compulsory subject that's kind of like a subset of that thematic context, if you will. And the picture task, they only need to describe 1 color picture from the choice of 2, and communication is privileged in the conversation, so they don't need to worry overly about making those grammatical mistakes. So just please encourage your students to talk and enjoy it as much as possible. And that's it. So thanks for listening to this speaking module, and I hope you get the most out of it. I hope you feel prepared for the exam, and best of luck to you in the preparations for it. Thank you.